Hello everyone, welcome back to another Skyrim guide. Today we're going to be talking about how to build a mage. And we're going to start it off by going ahead and taking a look at the different races. Now, as I mentioned in a previous video, your race does not necessarily set you in with whatever kind of class you're going to build. If you're going to play a high elf, I mean, you could definitely make an archer or you could definitely make a warrior if you really wanted to. Although these races that I am going to highlight are going to be ones that are going to kind of help you more than some of the other races would in terms of building a mage. So I want to start it off and talk about the high elves. The high elves are going to be the most obvious one. Shout out to Zombie Killer, playing that Gary's mod I can see. But the high elves, this one's probably going to be the most obvious one. They have increased magicka, which is always great. That just means that you're going to be able to fire out more spells. But they do have increased damage from magicka on themselves, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Most mages that you're going to build are going to be, they're going to be glass cannons. You can build a more tanky mage if you really want to. It all just kind of depends on how you want to tweak things. Glass cannon is definitely one of the more fun ones because you're just firing out, spells, and a lot of times you can end up killing your enemy before they can even think about touching you. So a high elf is not a bad option in that sense. A lot of times you're going to be playing with robes as opposed to light armor or heavy armor. Robes have no protections for you, so it's not going to increase any of those stats. It's not going to level you up, so that means that your opponents will not get a higher level. That's another thing that's very, very important here, especially if you're doing a glass cannon build. You kind of want to keep your levels to a minimum. Don't necessarily, go outside and work on your sneaking. Although if you want to make like a sneak mage, absolutely go ahead and do that. But for the most part, you want to keep your levels low so that way your enemies are low, so that way it's easier to kill. But yeah, high elves are definitely going to be one of the more obvious picks. The next one is going to be the Breton. This is definitely something where it's a little different than the high elves. They have boosted resistance to magic, and that's all magic, so that's fire, ice, and lightning. Resistant to all of that. Very, very good. This would be great if you were doing a battle mage or something like that. You could also just do a regular mage. It's not bad to have resistance to anything, especially lightning, because lightning can absolutely ruin a mage for you. So that's one of the things that you're looking at here. Bretons, they also have that active dragon skin, which is going to absorb some of the spells for you. That's great. The next thing I kind of want to highlight is the dark elf. Dark elf is not bad. They start with a boosted stats in destruction. They also have resistance to fire, and like I was saying with the glass cannon thing, fire does the most damage out of everything. It's just going to stack on top of you. And if you have a resistance to fire, that means you're not going to die as quickly. That's definitely going to help you out. And then the last one, and probably the least, is going to be the Nord. They have a resistance to frost. Now, that's not terrible, although you're not really worried about your stamina going down too much. So that's why I just kind of wanted to go ahead and gloss over the Nords. So after we're done going and picking out our race, you're going to be looking at your skill tree to kind of figure out how you want to go about building your character. So there's 7 things under the magic. There's Alchemy, Illusion, Conjuration, Destruction, Restoration, Alteration, and Enchanting. So you have 7 skill trees under the Mage. So we're going to start it off and we're going to talk about alchemy a little bit. This is just kind of some basic stuff. You're going to be able to craft potions that's going to use to restore your magic, potentially poisons if you're going to be doing something with that. This is going to be very, very helpful with daggers. I actually recommend that all classes kind of look into alchemy, although you will see the benefits if you're a mage just in restoring your magicka. The next is going to be illusion. Illusion, I think, is actually going to be one of the worst skill trees in the entire game. Illusion really doesn't have anything that important with it. You can do a couple things to kind of play with your enemies or even some of your friends' heads. For the most part, I would kind of stay away from illusion. The next thing is going to be conjuration. Conjuration is very, very cool. You can use bound weapons, you can trap souls, and then you can also just summon monsters to go ahead and fight for you. Conjuration is actually going to be one of your main damage dealing skill trees if you want to go ahead and look at that. But of course the one that most people are going to choose is destruction. Fire, ice, lightning, all those kind of things are going to be found under the destruction tree. Next is restoration. Restoration, that's pretty obvious. You're going to be healing yourself. There are some actual beneficial perks outside of that you could potentially look into. Then there's alteration, which is going to give you different kinds of buffs, protections of the sorts, water breathing, you can paralyze your enemies, that sort of thing. And then enchanting is another thing that's just for buffs. Weapons, armor, give yourself different enchantments so that way you can go about the game. So we're going to go ahead and the main thing that you want to look into when you're building the mage, the very first thing is, how am I going to do damage? How am I going to get through the game? And the most obvious one, like I was mentioning earlier, is destruction. So you're going to go ahead and go into the destruction tree. Now, this is something that I want to talk about first, and this is going to be kind of spread out through all the trees. You'll notice this as a commonality. Most of them have a novice level, apprentice level, all the way up to a master level. And it just depends. I think it's 25, 50, 75, and 100. Some of them may be a little different here and there. But for the most part, they have pretty well the same effects. It's going to reduce the cost of spells once you have this under that tree. So the novice destruction, you can see here, cast novice level destruction spells for half the magicka. All destruction spells are 15% stronger, and that's going to continue being the same kind of trend throughout the rest of them. The next thing that you're going to notice is the destruction dual casting. This is very, very powerful. It's going to make it so that way your spells are hitting a lot harder. It's also a really, really low level requirement. You only need 20 destruction. If you're picking pretty much any mage, you're going to have that right off the bat. And the next thing I want to talk about is the impact. Now, impact is phenomenal. You have a chance to stagger your opponents, and if you're staggering your opponents, if you're using, even the basic, if you're using even the basic flames, and you stagger your opponent, that's pretty well going to help you set up a kill. This could potentially allow you to get away as well. So for the most part, you're going to want to kind of go through. You'll do novice destruction. Apprentice is at 25. Definitely go ahead and pick that up as soon as you can. Same with destruction dual casting. Level 20. Apprentice and dual casting, it just kind of depends. If you notice that you're, two-handing your spells a lot, if you have flames in both hands, go ahead and pick up dual casting first and then go into Apprentice after that. And then look into impacts. But generally, you're going to want to pay attention to these kind of things along the way, just your adept and things of that sort. The other thing you have here is Rune Master. I don't recommend going into this. Runes really aren't the best thing. I mean, if you want, you can go ahead and bait enemies into it. You can absolutely do that. Runes just seem to be the least favorite way for me to play the game. The other thing that is very important when you're looking at the destruction is you have the 3 trees over here, the fire, frost, and shock. So this is going to give you buffs to those spells. So your fire spells, your frost spells, and your shock spells, it's going to give you buffs, and it's also going to give you resistance to them, and then you also have pretty well final attacks with them. Intense flames, you're going to make them run away from you. Freeze, it's going to completely paralyze them, and then disintegrate. It does exactly what it's when their health is low, they're going to completely disintegrate. Very, very powerful stuff here, especially the shock one. It's going to insta-kill your enemies. Very, very strong. The next one I want to talk about is Conjuration. You can break this down into 2 basic ways, so it splits in half, honestly. You have your bound weapons on the right side, as well as your, just general buffs. Definitely, anytime you're going into a skill tree, definitely pick these up when you're available to. It's just going to make things a lot easier for you as you're going about. But you have your bound weapons. That's going to be if you're like a spell sword or things like that. That's going to be your general thing. If you're more of a straight mage, you're definitely going to go onto the left side of the tree where you can be summoning your Atronarchs and your Dramoras and things like that. It's just going to make it way easier for you. Definitely go ahead and invest on the left side of the tree. There's also Conjuration dual casting. It's just going to make it better. Your things are going to be out longer. The only issue is you don't necessarily need to look into the longer lasting perks, just because a lot of times, especially early on, you're going to notice that your summons are going to be getting killed off. So I wouldn't necessarily pick these up as an early level skill, especially when you're summoning things like familiars or even a Flame Atronarch. I definitely wouldn't pick these up early game. This is going to be something mid to late game that you're going to be looking into. Over into the Alchemy Tree, you don't need to invest too much in this. It's basically going to be your level 1 stuff. Alchemist, you definitely want to pick that up. It's just going to make all your potions and poisons stronger. And then you're going to go over here. It's another thing that's just going to be a buff. But then you're going to see it split into 2 spots. Over on the left side, that's going to be your poisons. On the right side, it is going to be your buffs to like your potions that are going to heal you. So depending on how you're going to play your character, definitely stick to the right side if you're going to be more of a mage. If you want to use poisons, then you can go ahead and branch off on the left side. But for the most part, I would only recommend getting Physician and the Alchemist at the very beginning. That's really all you need if you're going into the Alchemy skill tree. Of course, when you get to later levels, you can go on from there. Next, I want to talk about Restoration. Restoration is fairly important. I would consider being like your third most important out of the skill trees, depending on how you go about doing it. This is very, very important, just because if your health's low and you're out of potions, definitely gonna need your healing spells. It's not just that, you also have things that are gonna heal you. So if you look over here, this is something that's very, very important for any mage. And it's actually a very low requirement. It's the perk Recovery. So at rank 1, it has a restoration requirement of 30. Rank 2 is restoration requirement of 60. Your magic is going to actually regenerate 25% faster at rank 1 and 50% at rank 2. Very, very powerful stuff here. It's going to help you stay online and be able to attack more. The other thing is, if you're going to be looking at a potential necromage build, such as going into the vampires and stuff like that, this is going to be another tree that you want to focus very heavily. So on the left side you have regeneration, which is not bad by any stretch of the imagination for just even general stuff, but then up here you have necromage. This is going to make it so that way all of your spells are more effective against undead. So you can also use that in combination with your destruction spells. So anytime you fight a Draugr, it's going to be more, but also, like I was mentioning, if you turn yourself into a vampire, you can go ahead and use a necromage, so you can use restoration spells, and it's just going to make it so that way you heal more. Just anything that makes you sap up any of their health or stamina or magicka or anything like that, it's going to be more effective for you. But it's also going to mean that if someone casts a fire spell on you, that's just going to do increased damage to you as well. So you have to be very, very careful with this. Although this is very, very powerful, you just got to be kind of careful with it. It's also got a very, very high skill level of 70. So this is something that's going to be more of a mid-game, although you can grind out Restoration to get yourself up to level 70 if you want to go ahead and go through a Necromage build. The next thing I want to talk about is Alteration. This is probably going to be your second most important skill tree that you look into when you're going to be a mage. It's general stuff here. As you're going about the tree, it's going to give you increased stuff. Like I said, you have your basic stuff here. There's dual casting. I don't consider dual casting to be that important with your Alteration. It will give you some buffs, although you don't necessarily need to do it. I don't think dual casting is the most important. So after you get skill 1, you want to go over here into Apprentice. That's at level 25. Very, very easy to get into, especially if you're popping an Alteration spell every time you go into combat. Over here, increased armor. On the other side, you have increased magic resistance. And then you have Adept here. You're going to have stability. It's just going to make it so that way your things have a greater duration. And then over here you absorb 30% of magicka. That's at level 100. So that is going to be a fairly late game spell. So if you want to go ahead and invest into that, if you want to really, really power through Alteration, by all means do it. Next I want to talk about Enchanting. This is going to be pretty basic. You want to start off, definitely get your Enchanter as much as possible, just so that way you can buff it. All of your skills are going to be stronger, and then you're going to want to progress along the tree. You have skill enchantments on your armor, so this requires level 50. Enchanting is not the easiest thing to level up. The easiest way to do it is if you go ahead, get a lot of soul gems, and then you just take jewelry, and then you can go ahead and buff it, and then you can end up selling that jewelry for increased price, so you can end up making your money back, although kind of getting started into this is going to be a little bit harder. The very last one I want to talk about is Illusion, and that's just because I think this is probably one of the worst skill trees in the game. You have your basic, level ups over here, but then you have things that are going to, work with you. So you have your calm spells that are going to be better, your fear spells are going to be better, and your frenzy spells are going to be better. And then on the right side, you're going to make it so that way you can cast it on different enemies, people, monsters, what have you. That's kind of the basis of it. So if you are going to be going into Illusion, you are going to be pretty much having to fill out the entire skill tree. So that's a big reason why I want to stay away from Illusion, especially because, it's just not that good. It's really not that good. If you want to go ahead and put into it and kind of try it out, especially if you're just kind of playing around, you've maxed everything out, and you just kind of want to mess around and play your Illusion, go ahead and do it, but for the most part I would stay away from Illusion. So that was my guide for the mages. I hope you guys go ahead and pick a mage. It's a lot of fun, especially if you're doing something where you're a glass cannon build or anything of the sorts. Any kind of mage is really, really fun to play, and I hope you guys enjoyed this guide, and I hope it helped you. I will be back with more Skyrim guides for you. Thanks.